For more on the RCMP's report and other topics, we're now joined by three members of Parliament. Paul Calandra is the Conservative MP for Oak Ridges Markham and the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister. Malcolm Allen is the NDP MP for Welland. And Carolyn Bennett is the Liberal MP for St. Paul's. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Paul Calandra, does the RCMP's report today suggest to you that the calls for a public inquiry are warranted?
No, just the opposite, Mark. Obviously, thank the RCMP for the report, but what the report shows is that majority of what we're seeing on reserve is spousal abuse and other issues. I was gratified to see that at least 90% of the cases have been resolved. Obviously, we have a lot of work to do. We have to work with our partners in the Aboriginal communities. We provided some extra funding to address that. Bill S2, which provides matrimonial rights to on-reserve women and other supports for women in difficult situations. So, look, I think the report shows us that the time to talk about it is done, and then the actions that we're taking to start addressing this are the right measures going forward.
All right, Malcolm Allen, what do you think? Are the government's initiatives that are already underway enough to address this problem?
No, I would say not, and the Aboriginal communities across this country are saying exactly the same thing. We want to thank the RCMP for its report. I mean, they did a heck of a lot of work here. But what clearly is pointed out is that Aboriginal women and girls are at a greater risk than other women and girls across this country, and we need to understand why. And that's why a national inquiry is called for, because we need to truly understand that reason and put an end to it. I mean, I think we all agree that violence against women in this country is something that we have to stamp out. But there is a very different challenge in the Aboriginal communities that we perhaps aren't seeing. And Aboriginal communities are talking to us and saying to us, listen, we need to have that inquiry across this country to help us understand what we need to put in place. Yes, there's some measures have happened. We can continue, the government can continue its measures. It's not a question of stopping one to start another. This is an issue of they believe they're going in the right direction, and they should continue with that. The inquiry wouldn't put an end to their particular measures that they've undertook. The inquiry may indeed enhance their ability to understand what else needs to be done. And that's truly what folks are putting their hands out and saying to this government, please help us enable us to stop this violence against women and girls across Aboriginal communities across this country. Right. And I think we need to do that.
All right, Carolyn Bennett, what do you think? What would a national inquiry actually accomplish?
Well, we've got to find out what's happening and therefore put in place the solutions. This report is so shocking that 30 years ago, Aboriginal women were 8% of the murdered women in Canada. It's now 23%. That's a quarter of the women killed in Canada are Aboriginal. It's clear that the status quo is not working, and what the government has put in place is not enough. So it is, from every premier in this country to the Aboriginal organizations, everybody knows that we've got to have a national public inquiry if we're going to get to the bottom of it and stop this ongoing tragedy that is getting worse.
Now, Paul Calandra, you referenced earlier the fact that a lot of the cases are being solved, that a high percentage of them are being solved, but isn't the issue that the murders are happening in the first place, not just addressing them from a crime and punishment point of view?
Well, absolutely, Mark, and the report quite clearly indicates that the instances on reserve are actually quite frightening. I think it was over 60% of the time the victim knew the person, the perpetrator of the crime. So we have to make some inroads there. That's why the government has actually provided funds in both its Economic Action Plan of 2013 and 2014 to address this, to provide solutions. That's why we brought in Bill S2, which was matrimonial rights on reserve for women, which also included other measures to help women who are in difficult situations be more protected on reserve than they ever have been before. So absolutely, we have to make sure that having seen what the RCMP have come up with, it's very, very clear. The time to study this is over. The RCMP have done that. There have been, I think, over 40 reports on this. We know where the problems lie, and now we have to provide the assistance and the funding, as we have been doing, and work with our Aboriginal partners to try and address this in a positive and proactive way.
All right, let's move on to the issue of the NDP's satellite offices. And Malcolm Allen, I'll start with you. Your leader, Tom Mulcair's tone at the parliamentary committee hearing was very dismissive, and clearly he feels that this is something that's being trumped up by his political opponents. Should the NDP, though, not be taking this issue more seriously since it involves taxpayers' dollars?
Well, we always take the issue of taxpayers' dollars very seriously. In fact, that's why we've been open and transparent about the fact that the offices was in Montreal. I mean, it's no secret. Wasn't a secret to folks in the House, but somehow the Conservatives and Liberals have decided to come together, and I would view this as more of a partisan political piece than anything else. But we are always very serious with taxpayers' dollars and how we expense them. We understood the rules at the time. We followed the rules that were there in place, and as has been pointed out, the Board of Internal Economy changed the rules. They, my friends will call it, well, we amended the rule. Well, that's a change. Whether you amend it to one way or the other, that's simply a change. And they changed the rules to fit the circumstances they didn't like. And so we complied with the rules when they changed them. And if they change them again, we'll comply with those rules as well.
Carolyn Bennett, what do you think? The NDP seems to be suggesting that you're in cahoots with the Conservatives on this one to embarrass them.
I think that Justin and the Liberal Party of Canada is very clear that we make decisions based on evidence and in the public good, and we have to call things as we see them, case by case by case. And in this one, we do think that just any Canadian watching the news, seeing people coming out of an office that says NDP on the side and that is their place of work, just doesn't seem quite right that their tax dollars are funding the person working in that office. So it's from very partisan flyers going into ridings where there's a by-election, we really do believe that Canadians want us to uphold the rules and make sure that we really do know the difference between our job as an MP and our staff and those that staff us as MP jobs and our work as a partisan activist.
All right, Paul Calandra, what do you make of the NDP's defense of this, the fact that the rules did change?
Well, Mark, the rules changed to stop them from continuing to break the rules. Look, parliamentary resources are to be used for employees who work here on the Hill or in constituency offices across this country. They're not to be used in partisan offices. I think it's telling that when the NDP were asked where their employees worked, they suggested that their employees worked in Ottawa. That is right there. They didn't say that they worked in Montreal or Quebec or Saskatchewan. They said they worked in Ottawa. That is contrary to the rules. And what it comes down to, I mean, it was actually quite disturbing. You had the leader of the opposition there. Not only was his tone insulting to Canadians, but then he tried to suggest that it was the clerk of the House of Commons who gave him the permission to go ahead with this, when she had already suggested that no, she did not do that. And let's be clear, the Clerk of the House of Commons is somebody who has served Canadians for many, many years, is above reproach, has always been a spectacular nonpartisan actor who has done nothing but great things for the House of Commons and for Canadians. And to suggest that she somehow...
Sort of like the Chief Justice, Paul.
And to suggest that she somehow had anything to do with this was absolutely positively wrong. Look, the reality is here, the NDP can just do the right thing. Simply repay the $3 million, make sure that this doesn't happen again. They broke the rules, they were caught. Apologize and move on.
All right, Malcolm Allen, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to wrap up here, but just before we run out of time.
Well, as you heard Mr. Calandra say, well, we changed the rules so they wouldn't break the rule. Well, if you broke the rule, you wouldn't have to change the rule to say that you broke it. It's the most convoluted logic, Mark, we've ever heard in our entire lives. They say, well, you didn't play by the rules, so we changed the rules so you would play by the rule. Really. What they're saying is they've changed the rules to tell us we can't do what we were doing, which was legal. And so now they've decided that they'll make a change to that, and they've done that. We've complied. We complied with the first rule. Now we're complying with the second rule. We're in full compliance, and that will be shown to be true.
All right, we'll have to stop there. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate your time, and enjoy the long weekend.
You too, Mark. Thank you.
You as well, Mark.